How many of you guys have heard this story before?
Once upon a time, there was a theist, and he so believed the Bible that he even defended the obviously stupid nonsense within it, to the massive detriment of his own worldview and others' ability to take him seriously at all. That story, like a couple of times, far too many really. Maybe you guys should not do that, and then you wouldn't sound so spine-shatteringly silly.
The brave knight defeated the fire-breathing dragon.
Oh, that one. Yeah, well, little known fact, that story is actually about me. And it wasn't that I slayed a dragon, it was that I laid a dragon. Sir Sick the Dragon Fucker, they used to point and laugh at me while I was at night school. No, not as in a school for nights, a school at night. It was 10 years ago, and come on, I needed the money for night school.
He rode off with the beautiful princess, and they lived happily ever after.
I wouldn't exactly call Mrs. Sick a princess, but I do think that she's beautiful. I mean, look at that sexy-ass face. So hot. Although strangely familiar. It's like looking in some kind of reflective surface and seeing a sexy thing.
You guys heard that?
You guys heard stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like fictional stories, do you? Well, do I have a doozy for you. It's the fakest story that ever faked, but we are gonna pretend that it's totally legit and a thing that happened. And then, when people ask us to prove it, we're gonna point at the book it comes from and tell them that it says that it's true. It's so stupid it will drive them fucking crazy. Look, I know that's not what they're going to say, but I can't lie. If it turned out that the entirety of religion was just one extremely committed joke, I'm just saying I would be impressed is all.
Yep.
But is it true? I mean, are dragons nothing more than just the stuff of fables, Bodhi?
Yes, what are we even talking about? Who needs to ask that question in front of a goddamn audience? It's like asking if Santa is real, or the Tooth Fairy, or if Sir Sick is handsome, famous, and good at the sex. We all know it's no, and of course he fucking is. What, are you stupid? Look at his missus.
Hey, you know what? The Bible talks about dragons. And that right there should grab people's attention.
Yeah, of course it should. Oh, my book of God-given facts also has a bunch of shit about mythical nonsense creatures that anyone who's about the age of 7 or above should know isn't actually a real thing. Maybe that book isn't quite the inherent work of the all-godder that I thought it was. I should subscribe to Sir Sick instead. I mean, I don't know why they say the last bit, but it's just what happens. Go figure.
It actually talks about dragons significantly in the Old Testament, not just one book, but all over throughout the Old Testament.
Oh, well, if that's true, it is fucking embarrassing. That would be like having an entire chapter dedicated to smiting the nation of the Care Bears and a parable about what colour a Smurf turns when you choke it to death. I mean, we already scienced that ages ago. It's ultra mango.
So when the Bible speaks of a creature as being a real creature, we need to take notice.
What you really need to take notice of is just how many creatures that the Bible completely misses. I mean, it's almost as if the only animals that are in there are the ones that the writers could see out of their windows, and maybe the stuff that someone else told them about from one town over. And here's the list. And counting all the animals featured in the Bible, including the, fake ones, that's a list of nearly 100 animals, which is quite a lot of animals. That's as many as a respectable, local, smallish animal sanctuary might have. But it's a little bit less than, fucking all of these bastards.
That's right.
So let's dive into this. Let's jump into dragons.
Oh, well, I've got to warn you, as an expert on jumping into dragons, they don't really like it when you, dive into them. You got to romance those big scaly bastards first. Really show them you care about them. And then you can dive into them for a night of hot, fiery passion and also sex.
Let's look at them in a little bit more detail.
Yes, let's start off here, Bodhi. Why do so many people in our culture today believe dragons are just mere fantasy?
Well, apart from the fact that the fantasy of a dragon is not mere, it's because, dragons don't real. The evidence for them is quite literally non-existent. And more than likely, the things that we thought were dragons were in fact the bones of ancient extinct megafauna that people thought, oh, hey, look at that big and scary thing. It must be a mythical boy because, that's exactly what happened.
Where is that coming from?
I think the primary reason is we don't find them.
Shonking shonk. They actually know the why of it. Now, if only they could apply that logic to God. They might even have a coherent worldview that makes any fucking sense. Although, I'm not holding my breath. Baby steps and all that.
I mean, that's happened over and over again. When you look historically, if people couldn't find anything, they just thought, oh, it's a myth.
Yeah, if there's no evidence for something, or at least no evidence that isn't explained far better by some other far more reasonable explanation, then yeah, the correct assumption is this complete undemonstrable thing is to say, oh, it's probably not true. Of course, the way he said that leads me to believe that he doesn't like that, logical conclusion, and will more than likely substitute his own quote-unquote logic.
And, we started to see trends like this. For example, there was the dodo bird. Okay.
I mean, maybe back in the way backs when no one could get anywhere without a boat and a lot of free time, but no one today thinks the fucking dodo is a myth. Well, no one's smart. And the reason we know they exist is because we have recorded evidence of their existence. We have literal examples of their skeletons from before mankind did an oopsie and eated them all to dead. I mean, even if some people don't believe in them because they have never seen one themselves, that just makes them incredulous in the face of the actual facts. Dragons, on the other hand, don't have anything of the sort backing them up. It's almost like they weren't and certainly are not fucking real.
Dodo is something I used to think you call your brother.
Yeah, you dodo bird.
But there's a bird, right?
I mean, obviously, dodos, them's are fakes and made up by Big Dodo in order to sell us ultra-rare dodo jerky. Because it's just so damn delicious. But apparently, you seem to think that dodos are an example of a mythical creature because you're a dumbass and as a child thought it was some random fucking word that didn't mean anything. As if words don't come from places and have etymologies. That means where words come from, because you definitely didn't know that. You fucking dodo. And I call you a dodo because they were so dumb they would just walk up to sailors that showed up because they had no survival instinct, because they had no natural predators, and got etted. Much like creationists are going to extinct the human race when aliens show up, and they keep insisting that they must not exist because the Bible didn't say them, so we should just ignore the big doomsday canon. I'm sure Jesus will save us.
And there's these ancient accounts where people would see these dodos, these sailors would stop by.
Ancient? I mean, late 1500s might be very old, but I wouldn't really call that ancient. In fact, it's well within recorded history, and the fact that ancient is considered to be well before that time period. Now, that's not to say that no other humans ever saw them before that point, but that's most certainly not why people went to the island and etted all the birds, you dozy fuck.
Kill them, harvest them for meat, and take off. And so there's all these accounts of it, but when people started showing up there later on, they're like, we don't see any.
Seriously? Per your example, because extinct creature was extinct, some random sailors possibly went there and couldn't find them. That means they're mythological. That is one of the most stupid examples of anything I've ever heard. And it's literally what I do, is to hear stupid examples of things. What the hell, man?
Yeah, a few hundred years ago, they thought the dodo bird was a myth because, number one, there were strange creatures. Number two, no one could find them. And number three, they only existed in these old stories and drawings.
Well, there's one of the most famous examples of the remains of a dodo in the goddamn world called the Oxford dodo, which has existed for literal centuries and is a real thing that people can look at and examine. And even if there were people who didn't believe in the existence of animals cause me am only see drawing, that doesn't mean that they aren't ignorant for thinking that. Much like the dumbasses of today that, I don't know, off the top of my head, think evolution is a myth, despite the countless numbers of evidence that demonstrate it thoroughly. No wonder that's how you think myths work.
Kind of sound familiar? Does it kind of parallel the dragons?
No, you fucking clowns. Unless you can show me an example of the remains of a fucking dragon that aren't clearly freaking dinosaurs and thus not fecking dragons, and you can't show me the countless reams of evidence and understanding that we apparently have about them, evidence and understanding that we do have about dodos, by the way, then there is no similarity. You're just a fucking absurd dipshit with no ability to discern fact from fiction. And, well, creationist. So, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking.
So, for a long time, scientists were saying dodos are a myth.
I find that extremely unlikely that scientists, as in all of them, thought it was a myth. I mean, sure, apparently some did. Maybe it was even most of them. But again, they were simply ignorant of the evidence that actually existed. I mean, there are plenty of scientists who don't believe all sorts of real shit because they aren't even remotely experts in the field where the evidence exists, and they don't have the chops to understand it, because scientist doesn't mean experts in all the everything ever.
Until they found a specimen that had been stuffed and put in a museum.
Well, that's just contradictory to everything you just said. So someone knew what it was and where it was. One assumes that even scientists had seen it at some point. Shonking.
And they're like, oh, wow, it was real. And now, of course, they found some fossil evidence of it and so forth.
That is so goddamn dismissive. And you guys and fossils, that shit's a big old bag of oof if I ever heard one. Fossils, that thing that disproves the shit out of most of the specific nonsense that you believe. I mean, it's no wonder you would want to very quickly gloss over them like that.
So we need to be very careful of jumping into that. And what happened back in the day, think 15, 16, 1700s.
What you mean at a time when there was so little collaboration in the scientists because, that they had to literally hop on a fucking boat and travel for months, often just to go look at a thing, or vice versa, compared to today when you can literally see ultra high detailed photos and scans and fucking 3D models of absolutely everything in an instant, to the point where things can be studied not just by some asshole in the middle of nowhere, but countless assholes all over the earth. Look, they might be scientists, but they're still humans, all right? And frankly, it's just not the same in terms of their ability to discover evidence for things. And funnily enough, giant fucking dragons that would have ruled the freaking world have yet to turn up.
A lot of the world wasn't discovered. We were still discovering places and finding places.
Seriously, it's almost like we have moved on from the time of exploration like that. You are comparing a world in which to even move across it was an endeavor of months or even years in some cases, versus a world in which within 24 hours I could be stood on the literal other side of the planet having a nice nap and numerous whiskies on the way. Assuming I could ever afford that kind of travel, but it would be possible. And even if I can't, I could still strap a virtual reality headset to my stupid bonds and have a damn convincing replication of that place, or basically any other place on the whole earth, within seconds, to act as if we know barely more than the people of what you called ancient times is fucking ludicrous.
And so if you didn't happen to find a creature in one place, you just assumed it was living somewhere else. This idea that they had gone extinct was just, who would have thought it?
Who would have thought a creature could gone extinct? Well, certainly not God. That motherfucker seemingly had no idea that most creatures he apparently invented had gone extinct before he even showed up to take the credit for their existence. And that's not to mention he thought that you could have a functioning population of creatures from a single pairing. It's like the guy had zero scientific knowledge, or at least the people who made him up had no idea how the anything worked. Almost like he doesn't real.
Yeah, you
Nobody
think
would've
about like
thought that.
elephants and rhinos. Like, what would happen if they were to go extinct today? I mean, maybe 100 years, 200 years from now, they could also have that same logic and say, well,
The only reason that I can think that could happen is if a bunch of anti-science morons attempt to take us back 200 years plus to when science was much harder and record keeping was significantly less capable than it is today. So, only if you get your way. But seriously, the chances of that being the case, with the sheer quantity of information, assuming that there wasn't some sort of worldwide catastrophe, we would not only have bugger tons of data on the creatures, including fucking live footage and samples of full freaking skeletons, and more than likely well-preserved, basically entire specimens. The idea that anyone other than the kind of person who probably thinks that they're fake right now would think they are a myth is just absolutely idiotic.
Same problem.
I guess they were a myth. But if it wasn't for all of our restrictions and Endangered Species Acts.
He sounds almost angry, and I agree. I mean, all these things that we do to keep worthless species alive. I mean, who really cares if humans go extinct? I mean, we can keep a couple of them around as brains in robot suits to run the whiskey factories, but other than that, they're just taking up space on the sidewalks. Get out of the fucking way. I've got important nothing to be getting on with.
Elephants would probably go extinct as
They
well,
probably
and
would,
we
all
would
sorts
just
of
be
creatures.
doomed to repeat the same mistake over and over again.
Yes, I am sure it is your lot who literally think that God gifted the world to you to do with as you see fit. Other ones really spearheading conservation efforts. And that's not to say that none of them do, but the amount of that humans can't do a climate change rhetoric does seem to come from Christians, because it's arrogant to think that humans pumping metric tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere could possibly do anything. Sure.
Yeah. So dragons.
Yeah, so dragons. What a fucking segue, man. You keep that up and I'll be fucking riding you down the streets before breakfast. Not in that way.
Dinosaurs and dragons, there's actually a connection between the two.
Is there? I mean, it couldn't be dumbasses find dinosaur fossils, go, fucking hell, that's a scary boy. Must be some kind of giant magical monster from the before 4 times. No, it must be that dinosaurs used the dragons as cheap, effective transportation. That's why we find the fossils all over the world, obviously.
And I want people to understand the word dinosaur is a new word.
So fucking what? Dinosaurs aren't dragons and dragons aren't fucking dinosaurs. Because one exists and the other is a mythical nonsense creature made up in the stupid ages to explain things that they simply didn't understand. I wonder why one of them ended up in the Bible and the other one was dinosaurs.
Wait, before you go, I have something super important to tell you. It's life or death. It will change everything forever. Nope, wait, it's gone. Oh well, probably wasn't important. But while I have you, don't forget to comment, subscribe and notify. And if you want more of my smexy voice, check out Mrs. Six's channel Spoonstaff Stories, where I narrate and voice all the videos, and she does the work. And if you want to support the channel, check out the merch store for cool t-shirts, or check out Patreon, memberships and PayPal to support directly. Finally, follow me on the medias of social to get completely pointless guff and to keep up on the latest releases. Oh, I just remembered what I was going to tell you. Whatever you do, don't touch the